Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. I have finished 8 books in the past week, so I got lots to tell you about here. And just a little bit of catch up. My knitting project. I am coming along. I've got more than a 12-inch square, working 2 inches square at a time. I'll pop in a photo here. I didn't bring it outside here with me. In the past week, my sweetie and I went to the very first Victoria Folk Festival. They had a bit of a, rocky experience. They said they were expecting maybe 200 people, and they sold out 1,500 people. And early on, they blew a generator, so we were there especially to hear Ferron. She was on at 2 p.m. and if you don't know Ferron, she is a trailblazer in lesbian music. Her first album was released in 1977. She has influenced so many women artists since then. But anyway, so she played Girl on a Road and Shadows on a Dime, all her big hits. But her set was cut short because they were trying to fix the sound system. So that was a little bit too bad. She was wearing a red heart on her shirt. And I noticed there was a whole bunch of women who also had these big red hearts on their clothing. So I asked somebody about it. And these were all women who had been to a writing workshop that she had led. So it was cool to be able to identify a whole bunch of her fans there. So that was on the Saturday. And then Sunday was Victoria's Pride Parade. I have put together a really short, 4-minute compilation video that I am going to include at the end of this video. So if you want to get a flavor of what the Pride Parade was like here in Victoria, stay to the end for that. And there were some great signs. So, for example, there was a flamboyant trans person walking in front of a BC transit bus carrying a sign that said, "Putting the trans in transit." And for this sign, you need to have a little bit of geography information. If you don't know, so Victoria is on the southern tip of Vancouver Island, and between Vancouver Island and Lower Mainland BC, so that arm of the Syilx Sea is called the Georgia Strait. And then to the south of Vancouver Island, geographically, we're very close to the US here on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. And that body of water is the Juan de Fuca Strait, which is where the Syilx Sea pretty much empties into the Pacific Ocean. So all of that to explain BC ferry workers, and they had a big sign that said, "Come cruise the straits with us." And I was sitting on the sidewalk on the curb right next to a group of really young people. Well, to me, young. They were probably 19, 20 years old. And they had to explain this flag to me. They started laughing when they saw a person carrying the sign, and that person came over to give them a closer look. I didn't get a good photo of it, and I could understand the yaoi portion of it. The flag said "Old Men Yaoi." Yaoi is a manga term for boys' love, and it's usually directed at women readers, actually, but two men who are in love. But the part that I didn't get was the old men and the photo that was on the flag. And so these people explained to me that they were characters from the Minecraft. There was a Minecraft movie. So I learned things. All right, on to the books. I am going to start with a drag queen story hour book, Make Your Own Rainbow, Drag Queen's Guide to Color. and it's by Little Miss Hot Mess with illustrations by Olga de Dios, who's a Spanish illustrator. And Little Miss Hot Mess is on the board of Drag Story Hour in the US. This is their third collaborative creation. The other two books I have talked about on this channel, The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, 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 and If You're a Drag Queen and You Know It. So this one is all about color. I saw so many different pride flag combinations at this year's parade. This is great. Anyway, so this is a concept book with lots of colors, not just the rainbow, but it went for red. There's every shade of red. So vocabulary. In some cases, I was a little bit questioning of the choices, but sometimes with printing, it is hard to show different colors. So for example, cerulean is here in the shades of indigo, and I was thinking cerulean is a blue-green color, but when I looked it up, I discovered that it can be a light cerulean or you can have dark cerulean. So okay. And in the pink section, puce is included. As far as I'm concerned, there's no puce here, but I do like that this skin condition, vitiligo, is pictured. There's people of all types. This is MC Glamour here. But puce is a sort of a brownish red or a purpley red color. Maybe you can call it a shade of pink. I don't know. Oh, here we have Little Miss Tony with white. So I didn't like this as well as their other books, but it certainly has its place with fun colors and concepts. Next, I have an audiobook, Trans History, from Ancient Times to Present Day. It's by Alex Coombs and Andrew Eakett. Now, this is actually an audiobook adaptation of graphic nonfiction done really well. So the two authors are reading the audiobook along with a full cast of so many other voices. So instead of having the different speech balloons pictured on the page, they have different people reading. And there's one section that's conversations with trans people, and most of those, or maybe all of those, are actually voiced by the person that they're having a conversation with. So I do recommend this. It's got the general history information about trans people, like it says, from ancient times to now. There is, especially in the contemporary times, a focus on the US. There's strong representation of trans people of color. I really like that in here. And one of the things they mention is how two-spirit, the term two-spirit, started being used in the 90s. It stems from a gathering that was held in Canada, in Manitoba, of Indigenous queer people, and they wanted to come up with a word to represent this gender diversity. And the Canada Post Places of Pride stamp series that I mentioned last week also has a stamp commemorating this Indigenous two-spirit gathering. Yesterday, I went to the post office and I got a whole bunch of these stamps. So I'm really happy about that. I've got another audiobook to tell you about. This one is from Australia, A Language of Limbs, and it's by Dylin Hardcastle. They are a trans, non-binary writer, and in this novel, there are dual narratives, Limb 1 and Limb 2. And initially, I didn't think that this was going to be a book for me. The impression that I got, especially with this cover, is that it was a romance. And there are love stories happening in both of these timelines, but it's not a romance. It's queer history. And it starts in 1972 for both timelines. And we meet a young woman, one of whom is outed just before she turns 16 and is thrown out of her family, and the other one who keeps her queer desires secret. So the effects of whether you're closeted or not, and this is in the 70s and 80s because it spans about 2 decades. So there's a whole bunch of Aussie queer history, including how the gay and lesbian Mardi Gras started in Sydney. Such great character work. We meet all kinds of people, all kinds of queer people. Yeah. I really enjoyed this book a lot. And I can give you examples of how my own experience is something that I'm always bringing to the books that I'm reading. So, and also other books that I'm reading. So, for example, there's a young man here who quits school, starts a mining job, and then has enough money to buy his first car, and it's a Ford Falcon. Now, I just finished reading Praiseworthy with a lovely group of readers, and there's a Ford Falcon that is featured throughout the story. And Tanya, who's from Australia, filled us in on the role that a Ford Falcon has in Australian culture. So I was able to bring that into the story. There's a part where 2 people go out to a hole-in-the-wall restaurant in Sydney, and they're eating bowls of laksa, which is a Malaysian dish. And Freddie and I, Freddie from Sluggish Reader, we're talking about laksa. Freddie explained all these different varieties of laksa that there are in Malaysia. So, of course, I thought of Freddie. And then there was the year 2002 when I had a year off work, self-funded leave. They call it 4 for 5, when I was working at the Edmonton Public Library, where I worked 4 years at 80% of my salary. And then the 5th year, I still received 80% of my salary, but that was a whole year off. And I spent that year traveling and working on farms. And during the time that I was in Australia, I also volunteered for the gay games that were held in Sydney in 2002. So in a language of limbs, I, recognized places that they were talking about and, remembered what it was like. So all of this is to acknowledge that our enjoyment of books often is affected by other things. But seriously, I think that this is a book that a lot of people will enjoy. I've got one more audiobook to tell you about. This one is a memoir, The Dad Rock That Made Me a Woman. And it's by Niko Stratis, who grew up in Whitehorse. And their father was a glazier, and Niko worked in a glass shop with their father, and writes about this very hyper masculine environment in Whitehorse at the time, mostly I think 80s and 90s, and the hyper masculine environment of a glass workshop. And they didn't come out until they're in their 30s. They didn't come out as trans until then, and now live in Toronto. But this memoir is written in essays that connect different aspects of their life to music. Dad rock is a term that was used to criticize Wilco's album Sky Blue Sky. It came out in 2007, and throughout this memoir, Niko talks about, what is dad rock. Their father, who was Welsh, really enjoyed music, often listened with headphones, but definitely had an effect on Niko's music tastes. It's a very tender portrayal of Niko's dad, actually. There are bands in here that I either wasn't familiar with or don't listen to, like Pavement, Sharon Van Etten, Courtney Barnett, Julian Baker, but other ones that I am familiar with, like Wilco and The National and Nico Case and Radiohead. There's the line from Bruce Springsteen's song, Dancing in the Dark, his desire to change my clothes, my hair, my face. And, so even for a musician who isn't gay, the lyrics can really affect a person. And Niko really brings that home in this memoir. It reminded me of Ivan Coyote's show Playlist, which is also one that draws on different pieces of music and how they relate to shaping a person, a trans person, from Whitehorse in the case of Ivan Coyote. But also I've just started reading the Vinyl Diaries, Sex, Deep Cuts, and My Soundtrack to Queer Joy, which is by Pete Crighton. I'm not very far into it, and I might not have a chance to even finish it before I have to return it to the library because there's a long waiting list. I'll tell you more about it once I do get to finish it. But this one is also structured with ties to pieces of music from early childhood. And Pete realized that he was gay in the 80s, and because of the AIDS crisis, was really fearful of sex. And so the AIDS crisis is coming up in various pieces of reading that I've been doing lately as well, like Dylin Hardcastle's book. Got another Canadian memoir for you, Degrees of Separation, a decade north of 60, and this is by Alison McCreesh. It's a very thick, heavy graphic novel, and I'm not going to keep holding it. Alison McCreesh is Quebecoise. She's a fiber artist working with felt, as well as being a cartoonist. Her style is just so beautiful, capturing landscapes. And as the title suggests, she's spending a lot of time in Canada's far north, but she also goes to Finland and Russia and Iceland. There's a map, lots of geography in this video with the points mentioned. A lot of that time is spent living in Yellowknife. If you ever are curious about what it's like to live in the far north, you will definitely get a good idea in here, especially because she's in so many different places. Like what it's like to be in a place where it's sunny in the summer at midnight and it's hot and there's all these bugs and you can't sleep. What it's like to be in total darkness for most of the day in the winter. She has lots of additional information at the back. For example, talking about the oil and gas industry, arsenic exposure from mining, how climate change is affecting Canada's Arctic and the people and animals and plants there, where she talks about Inuit art. She also mentions the textile piece that she was working on at a workshop in Inuvik, and she says, my piece, 12 years later, still not finished, which reminds me that I went to a textile workshop in the Yukon almost a year ago, and I haven't finished that piece either. It's only been 1 year though. This is a great book full of images that you can savor. It's not a fast read, even though there's not a lot of text on many of the pages. But like I said, you really get a feel for life in the North in all its variety. So this book is on the Eisner shortlist for memoir, and I've got one book left to read in that category, and that's this one, The Field by Dave Lapp. And it's another big fat one. I hope to tell you about that one next week. This next book is also one that I picked up, especially because it's on the Eisner Awards list. It's Helen of Wyndhorn. It's written by the American cartoonist Tom King, with illustrations by the Brazilian illustrator Bilquis Evely, and there are others. So this is a combined 6-issue release. It's in these Eisner categories: Best Limited Series, Best Writer, so that's for Tom King, Best Inker/Penciler, that's for Bilquis, Best Cover Artist, also for Bilquis Evely, Best Lettering, that's for Clayton Cowles, Best Coloring, and that's for Mateus Lopes. So it's in many categories. It's drawing on pulp, gothic, fantasy work of the 1930s. And so the story is about Helen, of the title, who is 16 when we first meet her. And her father, C.K. Cole, has died by suicide. And the frame story is that a governess that Helen's grandfather has hired to go and fetch her from Texas and bring her back to Wyndhorn is being interviewed about what she knows of C.K. Cole, who the governess never met C.K. Cole, but only knows of him through the daughter. C.K. Cole was an author of these pulp novels that have a niche following. So Helen is this totally willful person who drinks to oblivion and sees monsters, and those monsters are there at Wyndhorn. So she learns a whole lot from her grandfather and from being there. It's just so well told, and the illustrations are gorgeous, and I highly recommend this, which I found in Hoopla. Okay, this is the last audiobook that I got to tell you about. It's Bones of a Giant, and it's by Brian Thomas Isaac, who is Syilx from the Okanagan Band near Vernon in British Columbia. And his debut was All the Quiet Places, which is a great novel. In this book, it is the same family as in All the Quiet Places, but it's the younger brother. We meet Lewis when he's 16, so it's his coming of age story, living on the reserve, and it's 1968. And because I grew up on a farm in Alberta in the 1960s, I recognized so much here, like the woman who has to dribble fuel into the carburetor to get her vehicle going, to prime it, and all of there's lots of crude language and expressions, who, these characters who talk like my uncles. They say things like, "Then you're going to turn all hell loose. We'll scare the shit out of him so bad his hemorrhoids are going to pop like Cracker Jacks." This is historical fiction with a really strong sense of time and place. There's lots of hardships, which are mostly brought about by poverty and racism and the injustices of the Indian Act here in Canada. There's also lots of love, and Lewis is really a character you can root for. And my last book, so this is my favorite of the bunch, The Game of Giants by Marion Douglas. She is a lesbian writer from Calgary, and I first read her in the 90s. This was, I think, her second book, Bending at the Bow. And it's a discarded library copy that I've got here. I also read Magic 8 Ball and Dance Hall Road. And it had been a long time since those books came out. And last year, when I heard she had a new novel coming out, I pre-ordered it. And I bought it in July in 2024, and then it just sat on my shelf. This happens sometimes. Ben of Ben Reads Good has a challenge going on in Storygraph for all year. For the month of June, it was Reading Shame Forgiveness Month, to read something that you're ashamed that you haven't read yet. So I decided it was time to read this. I'm so glad that I did. Sean of Sean Breathes Books, he had Marion on his channel. I'll link that video down below, the interview with her about this book. And when I watched that, I thought, oh, I've got this book, I should read it. But I didn't. So anyway, thanks to Ben and his challenge, I did finally get to it, and I'm so glad that I did. I really love this because the central character, Rose, I just felt for her so much. So she was growing up in the 60s, so interesting that I've got the same or similar time frame as the other giant book, Bones of a Giant. And she keeps getting in her own way. I felt like I could understand, how that happens. And even though I kept wishing that she was different, sometimes, that's just how a person is. And you carry on in spite of the mistakes that you make. So it's the 1980s when she comes out as a lesbian, but by then she's already got a child. So this child has a disability, and the realities of parenting a child with differences and also being a lesbian mother are just captured so well the humor. Marion Douglas, she is so funny. Let's see if I can find a passage for you. So Rose's girlfriend is Lucy, who grew up in Kentucky. She was describing a time she had gone golfing with her mother and stepfather and a friend of theirs. It was the outfit I disliked most, she said. The shorts, the special shirt with the collar and cuffs. I mean, you would think I'd like it. It's quintessentially dykey, but I just don't grasp why there must be a golfing uniform. I told Mother I was going to buy myself a UPS outfit for our next game, so they didn't ask me again. Here's another line I love. The child is called Roger. I kissed her cheek and Roger's head, which smelled of baby and utter helplessness, and my heart was ransacked by tenderness. And yeah, I could say that my heart was ransacked with tenderness when I read this as well. I loved it to bits. And that's all the books I've got to tell you about today. I do want to report on the berry situation. So I've talked about raspberry cake and raspberry crisp. Well, since then I've made raspberry scones with all the raspberries I've been picking in our yard. And the scones turned out so well that I also made blueberry scones. And then yesterday it was raspberry and blueberry pancakes. So, berry season. My favorite fruits are berries. Yeah. And stick around if you want to see some scenes from Victoria's Pride Parade. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate hearing from you, so please say hello or put a pride flag in the comments down below. And happy reading, everybody. And I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.
Where are we going? We're going to go up and over, so on the right side of the street to go to Discovery. Makes sense.
I forgot I was going to have that.
I love your vest.
Thank you.
little baby girl. I know she's good. Everybody!